Hello, Dean Schwimmer here. Welcome to today's vlog. Before we get to today's subject, just a couple of small items I want to cover, starting with the massive explosion in Beirut. When I recorded my vlog yesterday, I said there were still questions about exactly what the blast was, what caused it. It looks like there is more information. It looks like we know now. Now, you may already know this because I'm recording this the day before you see it, but it looks like it's an ammonium nitrate blast. Ammonium nitrate, that's what Timothy McVeigh used in the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. He used 4,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate, which is about 2 tons of ammonium nitrate now stored in that warehouse, that facility in Beirut. 2,750 tons. That's not pounds, tons, and that's metric tons. So in United States, American tons, that's 3,031 tons. That's a lot of ammonium nitrate. We saw what just 2 tons did in Oklahoma City, so now you know why that explosion was so massive. We also know that that warehouse, or the ammonium nitrate in that warehouse, belonged to Hezbollah. They stored that ammonium nitrate, that highly dangerous ammonium nitrate, in that warehouse right next to civilian areas. That shows you what Hezbollah is. I hope that the Lebanese will get the message and push even harder to get rid of Hezbollah in Lebanon. They are really damaging the country. And you look at that one blast, imagine what an Israeli attack, a full-fledged Israeli attack, would do to Lebanon, to the whole country, if Hezbollah starts another war. So they're sitting on a tinderbox there. Now, if you watched the video of the blast, then you notice these smaller pops at the beginning before the major explosion. Somebody speculated that it's just some fireworks, some regular consumer fireworks that somehow went off. But I think it's munitions. I think it's bullets, shells, something like that. It really didn't seem like firecrackers to me. I could be wrong, but whatever triggered the blast, that was quite a blast, and I wanted to give you an update. This is what is known so far. We'll see what happens going forward. I would be curious to know whether it was an accident or whether it was deliberate sabotage, and if the latter, whether it was from outside the Israelis or somebody within Lebanon. Remember, they had a civil war in the 1970s. So it's perfectly possible that some faction in Lebanon, maybe Christians, maybe the Sunnis, made this blast happen. I have trouble believing that the Israelis did it because of the number of civilians killed. So I am really skeptical that the Israelis would have done that. They are very careful not to hit bystanders, but Arabs, they are not so careful, as we all know. Now, I want to move on to one more thing, which is this idea of mail-in voting. It looks like the Trump, well, it doesn't look like it's a fact that the Trump administration is suing Nevada about the mail-in voting. And this now gets us into, or starts us to get into, the subject I want to talk about today, because Trump is being criticized, or he was, because he said that Florida mail-in voting, quote-unquote mail-in voting, was fine, but not Nevada. That's what his critics in the mainstream liberal press, which is basically the press, accused him of, and they put up a tweet where he said that he was fine with Florida, and he invited people to request ballots to mail in. Trump was attacked for that because the press either they don't know or they refuse to acknowledge. Maybe they're being deliberately stupid, or maybe they just want to hurt Trump, because it's perfectly obvious that he was making a distinction between the traditional absentee ballot voting that we've had for a long time and this new thing that Nevada is doing now. And in fact, I'm sure that Nevada has an absentee ballot process in place that's been used for many, many years. But this is something new, where instead of somebody verifying that they're registered voters and entitled to vote and requesting a ballot, it's just a blanket mailing of millions of ballots. Just send them out there to, well, maybe people on the voting rolls, but it could be from the phone book, from the Nevada phone book, who knows. But that is the distinction, and there have already been examples of fraud in that kind of voting. I won't go through all the details. I want to keep this part short. I just want to mention that what Trump could do is could remind people of the safe harbor date, and he could call the Democrats out who are accusing him of thinking of changing the election date, November 3rd. But there's another date, December 8th. That is the safe harbor date. That is the date by which the states have to report their election results so that the electoral votes can be tabulated in the House and a winner declared. So Trump should say, well, we're not going to move that date. If you don't want to move the date of the election, then of course we're not going to move the safe harbor date. So if any state, and these are all blue states that are doing these mail-in ballots, or they're trying to do, so he should just say, well, if any of those states, if they haven't got a definitive result, and remember that there is an election right now, a primary election that was back, I think 6 weeks ago in New York. Carolyn Maloney, I don't know who her opponent is, but they had, oh, by the way, Carolyn Maloney was my congressperson for a while. I used to live on the Upper East Side of New York. So I guess I'd be happy if she loses. I don't know who is replacing her if somebody else wins the primary. The point is, 6 weeks later, we don't know who won. So imagine if that happens at the state level, maybe more than one state, and the winner is not known in time for December 8th. Well, then those electoral votes will not be counted. That state will not be counted if that date is stuck to, and Trump should make that very clear, because that should light a fire under the Democrats or give them second thoughts, because it presents the very real possibility, especially the bigger the state, the more the potential for this kind of a problem. So imagine that California and New York do not have their results in on time. And remember again that New York is already 6 weeks late in just deciding a primary in one district in New York City. So imagine that statewide, and imagine an even larger problem in a big state like California, an even bigger state. Meanwhile, Texas is not going to have this mail-in voting, so all their votes will be in, their electoral votes will be in on time. Their votes will be counted, but imagine if New York's and California's votes are not counted. Well, we can pretty much predict the winner of the election then. And now on to today's subject, which is about the Democrats' either inability or unwillingness, or both, thinking we're stupid or trying to fool us, their apparent unwillingness or inability to make logical arguments. I just talked about the mail-in voting, that there's an obvious distinction between absentee ballots and just mailing out, mass mailing millions of ballots that nobody has asked for, and some people may not have asked for them because they're not alive, or at least don't live in the district anymore. So that is a distinction that is so obvious that it's a little disappointing to me that Trump did not make that distinction. He talked about this the other day at a coronavirus briefing, and he said, well, Florida has had their system in place for years, and Nevada is just doing this now. There's no way to get it right between now and the election. But he should have said that it's the distinction between absentee voting and just mass mailing ballots. That is one instance of the Democrats not speaking logically, questioning logically, arguing logically, using reason. Now I've got two more. One of them came yesterday, and that was Ted Cruz. His committee, it was a subcommittee, he put up a video showing the violence of Antifa while these Democrats continue to deny that Antifa even exists. He was also talking about, he actually was focusing in the segment that I saw on Black Lives Matter. And he mentioned this really interesting fact. Well, first of all, he just read from the webpage of Black Lives Matter that they want to get rid of the nuclear family, that they want to get rid of capitalism, get rid of the police. And among all these principles, right from the Black Lives Matter website, is a call to boycott white-owned businesses. Don't buy anything from white people or white business owners. Cruz pointed out that these, I'd have to say craven, there's no other word for it, craven, that these Black Lives Matter thugs, that's what I call them, they have they use the title Black Lives Matter, and just based on that title, without looking into what the organization actually does, actually believes, these major corporations, Microsoft and Amazon, these giant corporations have contributed hundreds of thousands. I think one was $500,000, another was $500,000 to Black Lives Matter. And Cruz pointed out the obvious, that Bill Gates is white, that Jeff Bezos is white. So you have these white business owners contributing hundreds of thousands of dollars to an organization that is calling on us to boycott their businesses. It doesn't make sense. As I said, it just shows how craven they are. And Cruz just mentioned that, and Rashida Tlaib was there. She was on the dais. Some of these people were communicating from, over the internet, but she was right there. And she pushed back. First of all, she denied again that Antifa even exists, even after showing all those videos. And then to cap it all off, when Cruz mentioned the contradiction, the hypocrisy, the cravenness of these white billionaires contributing hundreds of thousands of dollars to an organization calling for the boycott of white businesses, Rashida Tlaib said that, well, it's free speech. It's free speech. But it's not. That's what I mean by illogical, because Cruz was not criticizing their speaking, either Black Lives Matter or Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, other white business people, not criticizing that they are speaking. He was criticizing that they are contributing cold hard cash to an organization that wants to put these major white-owned businesses, you can throw in Google too, all these, and Facebook, wants to put them all out of business. So you see how illogical that is. And now we get to the last example, which happened just earlier today. And that was Sally Yates testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and Cory Booker, who is really, in my book, and it's funny because he's a Rhodes Scholar, but he is the king of making illogical statements that are based on emotions and not facts. So number one, you have this committee whose purpose is to get to the bottom of the Russian collusion hoax. Who started it? Who is, well, the main thing that Lindsey Graham, the chairman, said that he wants to know is that it was known very early that the Steele dossier was bogus, that it was garbage. And there were two lower level agents who testified to that effect, but the Inspector General never thought to ask him, and Graham asked this at an earlier hearing when the Inspector General Horowitz testified. He asked Horowitz, when you interviewed these agents, did you ask whom else they told, or if they told anybody else, and if so, whom? That would seem to be an obvious question, and Graham was saying, well, we're not going to let these two low-level agents get hung out to dry and take the blame. They must have told somebody higher up. Whom did they tell? That was the purpose of this hearing, of the testimony of Sally Yates. But Cory Booker starts talking about, well, he starts talking about the Durham investigation, John Durham, and ask, well, the main point he was making, and Sally Yates agreed with it, was that Durham should not release his results before the election because it could help Donald Trump. Well, he used the words first, could affect the election, and that it could help Donald Trump. So the attorney, Durham, should wait until after the election to release the results. Now, the logical points that are being missed, and that's why it's so frustrating that Sally Yates would actually agree with this, even more frustrating that nobody, none of the Republicans, least of all Lindsey Graham, would ask the obvious questions that if there is nothing wrong, if there is nothing to criticize, if there is no evidence, if Durham is not going to indict anybody, then that helps Joe Biden. So you would want that to come out. But look at the other alternative, and this is what they are really saying, that there could be something that would damage, that would hurt Joe Biden, and it would be unfair to have that come out before the election because it could hurt Donald Trump. But the other side of that coin is that if there is inculpatory evidence that is going to hurt Joe Biden, well, first of all, we the public have a right to know this information before we vote. But the logical point I'm making regarding Yates and Booker is that if Durham has such evidence, then waiting till after the election to publish the evidence, that helps Joe Biden. So releasing the information before the election helps Trump, but releasing it after the election helps Biden just as much. And consider also that if Durham waits till after the election and Biden wins, then we will never, most likely, ever see that evidence because he'll just stop the investigation, maybe fire Durham, who knows. But that is another reason. But you see the illogical there. So if we're talking about being fair, the fair way to do it, and again, I wish a Republican had at least made this point, the fair way to do it is to leave Durham alone, that he should not rush his investigation to get something out before the election, but he should not hold back anything. He should not hold back his report if it is finished before the election until after the election. He should just put the election out of his mind, just proceed as if there were no election and release the report when it is ready to be released, not a minute earlier, not a minute later. And that's it for today. Thanks for stopping by. As always, thumbs up if you like this video. Share it with anyone you think would also like the video. Got any questions? There's, well, questions, comments, suggestions for future topics. There's a spot below the video. I would love to have more subscribers, so subscribe. But most of all, come back and see me again. I look forward to seeing all of you again. And until I do see all of you again, bye.